I used a gun to shoot both of my grandparents, Richard and Janet Sweet.
I had earmuffs on and everything. I took a point like this, stepped up one stair so I could see my grandpa's head. Boom, pulled the trigger back, pulled the bolt back, shot my grandpa twice in the head.
There is certainly a body inside, and I noticed a gunshot through the window, and so rather than go in and explore, we're calling you.
Viewer discretion is advised for this educational documentary. Welcome back to Case Documentaries. I bring you true crime, disturbing stories and other things that you may later regret knowing with regular uploads every week. Please do join the quickly growing, incredibly supportive Dark Case family by hitting subscribe now and turning on notifications. Thank you so much to all of my patrons. If your name is on screen right now, then you're a legend. Our love and respect goes out to all those affected by this dark case. Isaiah Richard Sweet's life was marked by difficulties. Born on February 7th, 1995, his parents Stacey Sweet and Christopher Garley had a tumultuous relationship due mainly to their substance problems. After Isaiah's birth, Stacey had another child with Ronald Kempinski. Eventually though, Isaiah was left in the care of his maternal grandparents, Richard and Janet. At some stage, Isaiah's parents' rights were terminated. This was said to be due to an incident of maltreatment by a neighbour when he was around 4 years old. However, there is uncertainty about the exact event leading to Isaiah living with his grandparents. Throughout his life, the family atmosphere with Richard, Janet and Isaiah was filled with arguments and disagreements. At one point, they moved to Iowa. This was when Isaiah was 7. The plan was to care for Richard's ill mother. His grandparents made the decision to restrict his contact with his mother Stacey, and this continued until she bought him a phone when he was a teenager. When Stacey returned to Iowa in 2010, the arguments began. Isaiah said he wanted to live with her, but Richard and Janet did not let this happen. Stacey eventually gave up and moved back to Pennsylvania in 2012. I should also mention that Isaiah was diagnosed with attention deficit disorder at the age of 4. Attempts were made to seek counselling from Families Inc. in 2011, but this was unsuccessful. Later, Isaiah was recommended for inpatient care due to substance misuse concerns, care which he did receive, followed by outpatient help from the ABB Centre in Manchester. It was at the ABBE Centre where he was diagnosed with ADHD and conduct disorder. The therapist there also highlighted limitations into Isaiah's insight and judgment. They suggested he may be experiencing symptoms of mania, and it was potential that he had bipolar disorder due to impulsive behaviours and risk-prone actions. Isaiah Sweet's interactions with juvenile court services were inconsistent, with referrals in March and December of 2011, and another following an accusation of molestation in April of 2012. In one incident, after a meeting with the JCS, Isaiah leaked from his grandparents' moving vehicle on their way home. He also had a history of multiple times trying to end his own time on this earth, the most recent attempt occurring just before his last arrest. There were also legal conflicts involving Richard with Stacey and his other daughter, Alicia. This was about the distribution of assets from Richard's mother's estate. These disputes resulted in Richard's arrest on a theft charge, which led him to lose his job. According to Stacey, Richard directed his frustrations towards his daughters, and sadly it meant that Isaiah was maltreated to an even higher degree. Apart from a past filled with molestation and violence, Isaiah did have substance issues at this young age. Grandfather Richard was an alcoholic, and it's believed that Isaiah was selling Adderall to Richard. Isaiah began using illicit substances at 14 and was a daily user at the time of his arrest. He admitted to misusing various painkillers and prescription substances, but he denied using meth or injecting substances with needles. He also denied having issues with alcohol or substances altogether, but he did admit to enjoying risky behaviours with friends, This included dangerous stunts like backflipping off of a bridge into shallow water and playing games involving dropping burning cigarettes between friends' arms. He recounted instances of excessive drinking and even recalled a friend burning him 15 times with cigarettes. All of these behaviours are quite extreme, especially for someone of his age. Suspected substance issues led to his commitment by his grandparents in 2011. At 15, Isaiah's alcohol use began to spiral. He dropped out of high school in his junior year with a low GPA of 1.061. Isaiah believed he was smart, but didn't apply himself and put friendships over his academics. He mentioned passing 3 of his GED pre-tests and planned to move to Pennsylvania at 18 to live with his mother and then attend Penn State University. His academic record was marred by multiple suspensions from school. Isaiah had a turbulent and hostile environment at home. He suffered alleged continuous verbal assaults, and he felt mistreated by both grandparents. He mentioned feeling overwhelmed by the stress caused by his grandfather's behaviour. On May the 11th, 2012, Isaiah retrieved a firearm from his grandparents' room. It was loaded with hollow point rounds to minimise their suffering. He put on ear protection to protect his own hearing. He aimed at his grandfather's head from behind and pulled the trigger in a moment of intense hatred. Grandmother Janet yelled, "What's going on?" and Isaiah turned and took her life as well. Isaiah then approached his grandparents, kissed them, expressed remorse, and prayed for forgiveness, recognizing what he had done, wishing he could undo it. Later, he picked up a friend and returned to his grandparents' house. He gathered a sawn-off shotgun, a sharp implement, the firearm used in the murders, along with some belongings and money from his grandparents' wallets. He then stole his grandfather's truck and fled 75 miles to Iowa City. He gave the murder weapon to a friend to dispose of and drove to Cedar Rapids. There he went to parties to numb what he had done, saying he didn't want to think of the murders. He also tried to end his time on this earth every night by trying to suffocate himself, but he repeatedly failed. Isaiah confessed to the murders to multiple people. This included his former girlfriend. The day after the murders, he attended a birthday celebration and then travelled to a party in Iowa City. During his time there, the police caught him for driving with a suspended license. They subsequently impounded the car. As he was taken into police custody, Isaiah falsely told the police that his grandparents were at the Mayo Clinic. He was allowed instead to contact his counsellor, and he was later released to them. Subsequently, Isaiah continued using substances and spent a night in a tent in the woods. On May the 13th, 2 days after the murders, some relatives came to visit Richard and Janet. This was in order to celebrate Mother's Day in America. Janet's daughter was the first one to find them deceased in the living room.
There is currently a body inside, and I noticed a gunshot through the window, and so rather than go in and explore, we're calling you.
The next day, on May the 14th, Isaiah was apprehended after he was spotted at a Hardee's restaurant. At first, he fled, both by car and later on foot, but he was quickly apprehended and arrested. He told the officers that he wished he was the one who was shot. During his interview with the police at the Manchester Police Department, Isaiah admitted to the murders. He recalled being constantly criticised and insulted by Richard. He said it got to the point where Richard was telling him to end his own time on this earth. "I don't know what's wrong with me," he said.
Put those things off you. Probably feel a little bit better.
Oh, yeah.
You're gonna be good with me, right?
Yes, sir.
All right. Grab some of that food, okay, Isaiah? Isaiah, since we haven't officially met, hey, my
Nice to meet
name's
you.
Scott Rieger. Okay, I'm an agent with the Iowa DCI. I am a police officer. I don't look like it, but I figure this is a little bit more comfortable for me. So
After this, is there any way I can go to the hospital for this? I cut it open on a rusty fence, and
Absolutely.
I'm pretty sure
Absolutely.
I'm worried about tetanus.
Yep, nope, absolutely. I'm going to show you this here. This is called a statement of rights and an acknowledgement of a waiver, okay?
Right to remain
Read this
silent.
to you.
Anything I say can and will be used against
Yep.
me in a court of law. Right to an attorney if I cannot afford one will be appointed to me.
You've got those things down already,
Yes, sir.
don't you? Okay, let me read these to you. Is that all right?
All right.
All right.
Oh, yeah.
Go ahead. Now down. When was the last time you had something to eat?
4 days ago.
You haven't eaten anything in 4 days? Right. And we got more food, so if you wallow that stuff down, you want to keep going, we've got more food, we can keep it coming.
Damn, you guys make me feel like I
Right?
didn't do anything wrong.
Well, why do you say that?
Well, let's put it like this. I'm not going to be lying to you guys about anything you ask me.
And I appreciate that.
No problem.
Okay.
They're not going to take this from me, are they?
What is it?
This is a real Rolex.
Okay, where'd you get that from?
I found it in a hopeless tent.
Down there?
Yeah, in CR.
Okay, we'll just keep it up there and we'll probably deal with that later.
Cops, there was like 4 or 5 cops. And
In Cambridge?
Yep. Looking for me.
Okay.
And one of them came up to me, started talking to me, asked if I knew where I was. And I was like, no.
So he
I
didn't
don't
recognize you
Yeah, I
at
was
all?
like, no, I don't even know where he's at. Like, I had my hair back to here. At first, he was asking if I saw the other cops. And I was like, nope. And then he was like, do you know who Isaiah Sweet is? And I was like, no idea.
Not a clue who that is. What are you thinking the whole time he's asking that?
I'm thinking, how fast am I going to run? As soon as he walks away from me.
What I want you to do right now is just kind of relax, go ahead and eat that food, kind of mount down. Like I said, I want to kind of start and kind of walk back through some things first.
Alright.
Okay?
More than anything, I want to know what the brought me to what I did, what's wrong with me.
Sure. Then, you know...
Like, I'm about to start bawling.
Okay. Hey, Isaiah. If you cry, that's totally fine, man. I respect that. Okay?
I want to go back so bad.
How come?
Because I loved them so much. They didn't deserve that. If anyone in that house deserved it, I did.
When you say what happened that night at the house, what happened?
Shot both of them.
Okay. What'd you shoot him with, Isaiah?
The assault rifle.
An assault rifle? You remember what it looks like?
Black.
Okay. What,
Black, bolt action, 10 or more round clip. It's Czechoslovakian.
Okay.
AR-15.
Okay. Okay. It takes a lot to admit that, Isaiah. Okay. That's not an easy thing to do. Okay, and Isaiah,
I'm not
this
gonna
is...
play dumb with you.
Okay, and I appreciate that. How you feeling right... I mean, you're with me right now,
I feel
right?
like I don't really know, like, much, but...
Okay, well, let me ask you this, Isaiah. You understand who I am.
Yes, sir.
You understand I'm a police officer.
Yes, sir.
You understand that the guys who brought you up here, why they had
Yes,
to find
sir.
you, okay, and they brought you up there. There's nothing medically right now that's preventing you to talk to me,
No, sir.
right? But you understand the questions I'm asking you right now, okay? There's no question that you're not smart enough to handle these
I'm
questions.
extremely intelligent.
Okay. And you know what? I get that. I think you
I
are.
just make stupid choices.
Yeah. And sometimes we do, Isaiah. Look at me.
I'm never gonna be able to go back on it.
No. And that's, you know what, Isaiah, part of this is that what you're doing today by telling me the whole truth as far as what happened, not only what's leading up to it, but what happened during it. I know it's going to be tough to walk through, but we need to do that, okay? And then we need to talk about what happened afterwards, okay?
I sat at home on house arrest all day.
Okay. Were Grandpa and Grandma home?
And then I went down to the basement. There's a door that goes into the garage from the basement. I went up through the garage and then in their room, took the assault rifle out of their room. And then I loaded it with 10 bullets, walked up the stairs, took like a point like this, had earmuffs on and everything. I took a point like this, stepped up one stair so I could see my grandpa's head. Boom, pulled the trigger back, pulled the bolt back, shot my grandpa twice in the head.
Where was your grandpa sitting?
They were both sitting on the couch.
Okay. And where were you at?
I was on the stairs coming up
Like coming up from that landing? Okay, because I've heard, I haven't been inside your house, but you know, some of the guys were up there the other day and they were kind of going through it.
hollow point assault rifle rounds. And then
Okay.
I went up to him and I just broke down, started crying. I told him how much I loved him.
He was later charged with murder and held on a $1 million bond.
The couple was found shot dead in their home in Manchester in May of 2012. Sweet was later arrested in Cedar Rapids. He pleaded guilty to 2 counts first-degree murder.
In October of 2013, Isaiah Sweet's case went to trial for 2 counts of first-degree murder. However, during the trial, he reached a plea agreement with the state. He decided to plead guilty to the 2 counts of first-degree murder. The agreement included a recommendation from the state for concurrent sentences. The sentencing hearing was scheduled based on his age and the existing laws. Upon taking the plea agreement, the court conducted an inquiry with Isaiah to ensure the truthfulness of the testimony witnesses would provide based on the stated facts. The district court accepted the guilty plea and ordered a pre-sentence investigation report. During the sentencing hearing in February of 2014, the state presented testimony from John McInerney, a juvenile court officer. The officer provided information gathered from about 10 meetings with Isaiah, meetings that started in December of 2011 after Sweet faced charges for possession of illicit substance paraphernalia. He detailed Sweet's family life, the counselling sought for his behaviour and his mental health issues, and he highlighted his long juvenile record. During the trial of Isaiah R. Sweet, the most contentious witness on the first day of testimony was Brandon Ehlers. Defense attorneys attempted to portray Brandon as someone testifying only to reduce the criminal charges that he faced. He testified that on May the 11th, 2012, Sweet texted him asking about different methods of murdering people, discussing poisoning with substances like cyanide, arsenic and nicotine, as well as asking about loading an AR-15 rifle. Brandon Ehlers said that shortly after midnight on May the 12th, Sweet arrived at his place with 2 firearms and a TV, confessing, "I did it. It's done." The next morning, Sweet allegedly told him he could take anything he wanted from his grandparents' house. Brandon admitted breaking in but left immediately upon discovering the bodies. He said that he was too scared to call the police. Ehlers, who was sentenced to 18 years in prison in September on various charges related to the killings and subsequent thefts, had 2 charges of first-degree murder dropped as part of a plea agreement. A condition of this agreement was his testimony against Isaiah. Following this, Sweet's defense presented the testimony of Dr. Stephen Hart. He is an expert in clinical psychology, specializing in violence assessment and psychopathic personality disorder. Dr. Hart reviewed documentation regarding Isaiah. As well as that, he conducted an interview with him before preparing his report. He concluded that Sweet suffered from severe developmental problems, from mental health issues, challenges in personal relationships, and struggles with educational adjustment. Dr. Hart indicated that Isaiah's decision-making was affected by attention disturbances and impulsivity, attributing these issues at least in part to severe attention deficit disorder. He also emphasized that Sweet's psychological and social immaturity, estimating his psychological and social maturation to be more in line with a 12, 13 or 14-year-old despite being chronologically 17. He highlighted that although Sweet's actions seemed planned, they were not executed with the precision of a seasoned criminal, characterizing them as a poorly executed plan, rather than the work of a well-prepared offender. Dr. Hart concluded his testimony by stating, Isaiah Sweet's prospects for rehabilitation were uncertain and mixed. He suggested there was a possibility of partial or full remission of his symptoms, but couldn't determine definitively whether Sweet might develop a full psychopathic personality disorder in adulthood. Even if he did, the treatability of such a disorder couldn't be predicted. He emphasized that a determination about Sweet's potential for rehabilitation might not be feasible until he reached the age of 30 due to his youth. Isaiah Sweet took the stand last. He expressed remorse, and he discussed the troubled relationship he had with his grandparents. He said that this led to significant trust issues. He appealed to the court to consider his youth and expressed his desire for rehabilitation when determining his sentence. The district court delivered its sentencing on March the 11th. Despite Sweet's age at the time of the murder, which was 17 years and 3 months, and the debatable levels of his maturity, the court also expressed skepticism regarding Dr. Hart's somewhat optimistic view of Sweet's potential for rehabilitation, emphasizing the severity of this case. Isaiah Sweet's case was exceptionally rare. They believed this justified a sentence of life without the possibility of parole. The decision stemmed from the exceptionally horrific nature of the murders, a crime which reflected a profound lack of humanity. The court's conclusion was that Sweet was, and would remain, a significant threat to society. Balancing the interests of justice and community safety, the court deemed that these concerns outweighed any mitigating factors. Sweet, however, appealed his sentence to the Iowa Supreme Court. In May, the court prohibited life sentences without the possibility of parole for juveniles convicted of first-degree murder. As a result, Sweet was re-sentenced later that year to life in prison with the possibility of parole. He is currently being held at the Iowa State Penitentiary in Fort Madison. Recently, a 3-member panel of the Iowa Board of Parole reviewed Sweet's case. Despite recognizing his efforts during his 4 years in prison, such as earning a career readiness certificate and participating in rehabilitation programs, the board aligned with the Department of Corrections and recommended against his release. They determined that Sweet would require more time to exhibit the necessary changes before considering parole. This decision aligns with a 2016 ruling by the Iowa Supreme Court, a decision which deemed life sentences without parole for juvenile offenders as cruel and unusual punishments. It was rooted in the understanding, supported by neuroscientists, that teenage brains are not fully developed, making youths more susceptible to peer influence and to impulsive behavior. The case's significance extends beyond Isaiah Sweet's situation. It reflects a broader trend of recent court decisions at state and federal levels. Decisions are to stop the imposition of mandatory punishments for juvenile offenders. The Iowa Supreme Court in particular has been instrumental in these rulings, banning mandatory minimum sentences for all juvenile offenders in 2014, and more recently striking down unconstitutional provisions in laws related to sentencing juvenile offenders to life in prison without parole. Do you think the punishment fits the crime here? What do you think can be done to avoid something like this happening again in the future? Please do let me know down in the comments. Be careful out there, and I'll see you soon.